Shalom and welcome to this presentation on YHWH's Timekeeping Lights, the Sun, Moon, and Stars, Part 5, by Daniel Fuentes, servant of YHWH. Here is a warning against not reckoning the order of the four seasonal divisions in the 364-day year of Almighty Yah. This warning is found in Enoch, chapter 82, and it's found in verses 4 through 6. Verse 4, Baruch, blessed, are all the righteous. Baruch are all those who walk in the way of righteousness and do not sin as the sinners, in the reckoning of all their days, in which the sun traverses the Shamayim, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days, with the heads of thousands of the order of the stars, together with the four which are intercalated, which divide the four portions of the year, which lead them and enter with them 4 days. Verse 5, owing to them, men shall be at fault, and not reckon them in the whole reckoning of the year. Also, men shall be at fault, and not recognize them accurately. For they belong to the reckoning of the year, and are truly recorded forever. One in the first portal, and one in the third, and one in the fourth, and one in the sixth, and the year is complete in 364 days. Praise Yah. Let's consider this scripture. It's very powerful as well for understanding the importance of the seasons, the four seasonal divisions, and their order. Let's go back to verse 4. It says, let's look at the parts that I highlighted. It says, the righteous, the blessed are those who do not sin in the reckoning of all their days. So it's actually a sin. It's contrary to the things of the Almighty to reckon your days incorrectly. Now, it says, concerning these days of reckoning, it says in which the sun traverses the Shamayim. So the sun is doing its traveling across the Shamayim, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days, because we know that, as we've already proven, the 364-day solar year has 12 solar months, and each one has 30 days. And then every 3 months, there's an extra day. And that third month that has that extra day, which is the 31st day of that month, or the 91st day of that season, it's there for the turning of the season. Now, coming back into verse 4, so the 30 days are understood what that means. Then it says, with the heads of thousands of the orders of the stars. Praise Yah. So the sun is also with the heads, meaning the leaders of thousands of the order of the stars. Now, it also says, so not only the stars, so the stars are doing their thing also. And this is really important because when we get to part 8 of this presentation, it's all about the Chokavim, the stars. We're going to understand that the stars have a role to play as well. So then we see here, so it's not only the sun, not only the stars, but together with the four, there are specific four. So we just spoke of, in verse 4, the heads of thousands, meaning the leaders of the thousands of the order of the stars. And now where it's talking about together with the four, it's talking about the leaders of these four specific days that are intercalated. These four specific days that are intercalated, it means they've been added. So every 3 months of a season, there's that additional day, again at the end, that 91st day that is for the turning of the season. It's added there as a marker by the Almighty Himself for us to understand that the seasons are turning. So those four which are intercalated, and what do these four do? They divide the 4 portions of the year. Again, these are the 4 seasons. Praise Yah. Now, in verse 5, owing to them. Owing to who? To these 4 that divide the 4 portions of the year. So, in regards to these 4 seasonal divisions, men are at fault. Men don't reckon them. If you don't reckon them in the whole reckoning of the year, meaning you try to understand the scriptural year some other way without considering the 4 seasonal divisions and their order and when they start, you'll be at fault. That means you're wrong. Also, men shall be at fault. They'll also be wrong and not recognize them accurately. And that's what we're happening now too. That people think that Aviv can mean anything, that you can have Aviv in the winter time. So I believe this scripture is very powerful as well to prove the importance of the 4 seasonal divisions being reckoned in the understanding of the scriptural year, which we know is the 364-day solar year, and also that it's done accurately, that we understand what Aviv means, that it means spring, that it is the beginning of the scriptural year. Now in verse 6, again, speaking of these 4 divisional days, for they belong to the reckoning of the year. That's what they're there for, and are truly recorded forever. One in the first portal. Now, the one in the first portal is referring to the turning of the season into winter. When you go back to the teaching, part 3, that explains the 12 months, the 12 solar months tracked in Hanok, that lead us to 364 days, for us to understand that whenever the Almighty speaks of 364-day year, it's speaking of those solar days and those solar months. Here we see, if you go back to that teaching and look at those slides, you'll see that in the first portal, that is speaking of the turning into winter. Then it says here in the scripture, verse 6, it says, and one in the third. And again, paying attention to in that part 3 teaching, you would see that in the third portal, that's the turning of the season into spring. So that right there is the one that happens right at the end of the year, day 364. That's where the season turns into spring. And then we have here in verse 6 again, it says, and one in the fourth. Now the one in the fourth portal of the seasonal divisions, that's the turning of the year into fall. And then the scripture here in verse 6 says, and one in the sixth. The one in the sixth portal is the turning of the season into summer. So again, this is referring to these 4 seasonal divisions in verse 6 and just confirming that the year is completed in 364 days. You can't separate them from the reckoning of the 364-day year of the Almighty Yah. Yovelim, Jubilees, chapter 6, verse 36. For there shall be those who shall assuredly make observations of the moon. Now it disturbs the seasons, and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. Obviously, this scripture is referring to the moon. It's not speaking of the solar year or solar months, and it's letting you know that it disturbs the seasons. And what that means is, remember, the sun is the one who's responsible in its annual course for dividing the 4 seasons throughout the year. The moon has to be aligned to the sun to keep the same time with it. However, the way the Almighty created the moon, it does not align 364 days with the sun. It's 10 days shorter. So this scripture is letting you know that it disturbs the seasons, and we're going to prove that. What that means, it's the moon that disturbs the seasons. So we have to be careful. And also, let us pay attention that the moon comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. The 12-month lunar year, being comprised of 354 days, ends 10 days earlier than the 364-day solar year. This happens every year. Following a repetitious, strictly 12-month lunar year involves applying the Moedim without subjection to the 364-day solar year, which disturbs the seasons, in which the Moedim have already been appointed to align within the 364-day solar year. So this is what disturbing the seasons mean. When those who observe the moon are just going by 12 strict 12 strict lunar months, and they're rejecting the solar year. They're not even looking at it. They don't understand. So by neglecting understanding of the solar year, the 364 days, and it's already governing of the seasons, then you end up saying that it's the first Chodesh and that we should be keeping the Pesach. However, it's still the winter season, and you don't even understand that. That's what it means that you're disturbing the seasons now. We will find evidence with additional scriptures we'll look at. Yobelim Jubilees, chapter 6, verse 37. For this reason, the years shall come upon them, when they shall disturb the order, and make an abominable day the day of witness, and an unclean day a feast day. And they shall confuse all the days, the Chodesh with the unclean, and the unclean day with the Chodesh, for they shall go astray as to the months, and the Shabbatot, and festivals, and Yovelim. So here we see another warning of what happens if you follow a strict 12 lunar month year. Following a repetitious, strictly 12-month lunar year involves applying the Moedim, okay, which are the set apart time, the appointed times, without subjection to the 364-day solar year. When you do this, it disturbs the order of the seasons, because you're going to say it's Aviv, it's the first Chodesh, and it's still winter time. You're going to be keeping your Pesach and your Chag HaMatzot in the winter time, because you don't understand how to align with the 364-day solar year. You don't understand how to keep your lunar months under subjection to the 364-day solar year. Okay? This confuses all the days, and it does it not? The months, the Shabbatot, the festivals, the Yovelim, because they happen out of season and out of alignment with the 364-day solar year. And also in Hanok chapter 74 verses 13 through 14, we'll see another warning about the 12-month lunar year. This is speaking of the solar year in verse 13. In 3 years there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years 1,820 days, so that in 8 years there are 2,912 days. Verse 14, now it's speaking of the moon. For the moon alone, the days amount in 3 years to 1,062 days. Let's pause right there. Let's go back up to verse 13. For the sun, in 3 years, it was 1,092. For the moon, it's 1,062. So you see it's 30 days behind the sun, because that's 3 years, 10 days each year. 10 times 3, 30 days. So that's a whole moon. 30 days is a moon. A whole moon of misalignment with the sun. In 3 years, you already have that. Let's continue with verse 14. In 3 years, 1,062 days. In 5 years, she falls 50 days behind. So there we see that verse 13 is speaking of a 364-day solar years. In 3 years, 364 times 3 equals 1,092 days. In 5 years, 364 times 5 equals 1,820 days. In 8 years, 364 times 8 equals 2,912 days. Verse 14 is speaking of 354-day lunar years. In 3 years, 354 times 3 equals 1,062 days. Let us continue in Enoch chapter 74, verses 15 through 16. Verse 15, and it's still speaking of the moon, and in 5 years there are 1,770 days, so that for the moon the days in 8 years amount to 2,832 days. Verse 16, for in 8 years she, the moon, falls behind to the amount of 80 days. Again, falls behind has to do with being misaligned with the sun and with the seasons. All the days she falls behind in 8 years are 80. So again, every year, 10 days. Verses 15 and 16 are speaking of 354-day lunar years. In 5 years, 354 times 5 equals 1,770 days. In 8 years, 354 times 8 equals 2,832 days. The 354-day lunar year falls behind the 364-day solar year by 10 days each year. Almighty YHWH has already shown us that the Chodeshim, the lunar months, are used for determining his Moedim, okay, his appointed times. He has also shown us that his Moedim are reckoned in a 4-season divided 364-day solar year that begins each spring. How do we heed his warnings and reconcile these commands without adding or taking away from his word? The 13th lunar month in subjection to a 364-day solar year. Yovelim Jubilees chapter 6 verse 36 affirms, the 12-month lunar year disturbs the seasons in the 12-month solar year by ending 10 days too soon each year. Yovelim Jubilees chapter 6 verse 37 affirms that the application of the Moedim to a repetitious strictly 12-month lunar year disturbs the order of the seasons and confuses the days, because the Moedim are appointed to align with the 364-day solar year. Enoch chapter 74 verses 13 through 16 affirms that each year the 354-day lunar year falls behind the 364-day solar year by 10 days. We keep the command to observe the application of the Moedim using the Chodeshim, or renewed lunar months. That's found in Shemot Exodus chapter 12 verses 1 through 2. We keep the command to observe a 4-season, 13 weeks per season, divided 52-week, 364 days solar year that begins in spring, and that's found in Yovelim Jubilees chapter 6 verses 29 through 32, in Enoch chapter 72 verses 31 through 32, and also in Enoch chapter 82 verses 15 through 16. We heed the warning not to follow a repetitious, strictly 12-month lunar year that disturbs the order of the seasons and confuses the Moedim, and that's found in Yovelim Jubilees chapter 6 verses 36 through 37, and Enoch chapter 74 verses 13 through 16. By keeping and heeding the above commands and warnings of YHWH, the 13th lunar month appears. It appears on some years as an intercalated lunar month in the 364-day solar year. So this 13th lunar month is simply a waiting period, a moon of waiting, a month of waiting, until the scripturally obedient first lunar month of Aviv appears. And we had evidence of that in Shemot Exodus chapter 13 verses 4 through 5, which command us to keep the Pesach Chag HaMatzot in the month of Aviv, and in Enoch chapter 82 verses 15 through 16, which confirms that the Almighty's year begins in the spring season, and the Aviv is the spring season. So again, the 13th lunar month is not subject to the Almighty's command for us to know what Aviv is, and that's why we can't apply the Moedim to it, and that's why we have to reject it and wait for the scripturally obedient month, first lunar month of Aviv to appear. Praise Yah. The 354-day, 12-month lunar year is out of balance with the 364-day, 12-month solar year by 10 days per year. As the years proceed, these days accrue to create a potential additional lunar month on some years. It's all in the word. If you just understand what the word is telling you, it's right there. This additional month must be synchronized back into the solar year to avoid disturbing the appointed times of YHWH in his seasons. Because the Almighty begins his 364-day solar year in the spring, and he expects that we obey and that we wait for that Aviv, first Chodesh in the spring season. We must obey. We must ensure that Pesach, as we will find out, Pesach and Chag HaMatzot, the Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, we must ensure that that happens in the spring season. So the Chodesh that we choose to be the first Chodesh that we call Aviv, it must fulfill that. To prove this, if one counted only 12 strict lunar months per solar year, the first lunar month would shift backwards from the correct spring season to the incorrect winter season, to the incorrect fall season, to the incorrect summer season, then eventually back to the correct spring season over several decades. And you can test that for yourself. I did. I already proved it to myself that you can start off in the spring and it will continue to shift backwards out of season into winter, and then again into fall, and then into summer, and then back into spring. So that's what the disturbing of the seasons does, and it's proven when you follow 12 strict lunar months. You can try it for yourself. That's exactly what the scripture is referring to when it speaks of disturbing the seasons and disturbing the order of the seasons. Almighty YHWH decides when a 13th lunar month is necessary for the keeping of his word. And it doesn't have to be called a 13th lunar month. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it a moon of waiting. It doesn't have to be called a 13th lunar month. The simplicity of this task will be proven when one reckons the close and beginning of the 364-day solar year each year according to the parameters from YHWH's word. And we're going to see that. When we do that, we're literally going to count these 364 days, and we're going to be able to see, are we to accept this moon? Is it what we would consider in our time a 13th lunar month, which means we would use it as a waiting period because it does not obey the word of the Almighty for what an Aviv Chodesh first month should be? Traditional requirements for a Jewish leap year or scientific framework of the Metonic cycle are not necessary, and they are not consulted. You have to understand that this has nothing to do with those things. This has everything to do with the word of the Almighty and interpreting it and following it. It has nothing to do with the Jewish leap year and whatever requirements they have. It has nothing to do with the Metonic cycle and whatever scientific framework is being followed. It doesn't even have to be consulted. All you need is the word of the Almighty, and you'll know what to do, and you'll know if it is a 13th lunar month or not. Thank you for joining me for part 5 of this presentation. We found a warning not to forget to include the 4 seasonal divisions in the reckoning of the 364-day solar year. We also found a warning about the 354-day lunar year being out of alignment with the 364-day solar year by 10 days each year, and thereby disturbing the seasons and confusing all the days and months in which the Moedim are supposed to take place. We also learned of the appearance of the 13th lunar month or moon of waiting, when it does not fulfill the commands of Yah. Here are the references that were used in part 5 of this teaching. I hope you'll join me for part 6 of this teaching.